Let's be real. We live in a world full of inequity. Most inequities are the result of long-standing practices and priorities that have been in effect for centuries. And of course, inequities impact all of us differently. As we work to create a more equitable and inclusive world, it's important for us to think about the consequences of those inequities on the lives of the people who are the targets of them. This can help us better understand how we can build belonging and how not to replicate harm. In this module, we will explore the effects of inequity through the phenomenon we call cumulative burden effect. Let's follow Audrey through her day to see how it works.
On the way to work, Audrey stops to get a cup of coffee, and even though she's been waiting to be served, another customer comes in and the barista processes the new customer's order first. Excited to start her new job, Audrey arrives at work and notices she's the only Black person. There's no other employees who look like her on her team or in the entire department. As Audrey eats lunch, she notices other employees looking in her direction and talking softly. She has the distinct feeling that they are talking about her. One of the people watching her gets up and leaves. A few minutes later, security walks in to ask her questions about who she is. During a meeting, Audrey has a great idea she feels confident will be helpful to her team. She explains the idea. As she is finishing her comment, a coworker excitedly begins speaking over her. Audrey stops speaking and smiles to not appear rude. Her supervisor compliments the coworker as Audrey thinks, "Isn't that exactly what I just said?" After finishing up her workday, Audrey meets up with a friend for happy hour. Audrey shares her frustrations from the day. Her friend says to her reassuringly, don't worry, none of those things are a big deal." After going home in an attempt to relax and clear her mind, she looks at her social media, where she finds imagery of a person who looks like her being brutally harmed while others watch and film the event.
What's happening to Audrey during this day can be a regular occurrence for many Black people. Anti-Blackness, which describes actions, behaviors, or institutional practices that minimize or devalue the full participation of Black people in life, can lead to Black people being ignored, seen as a threat, disrespected, and subjected to harm. In addition, as a Black woman, Audrey is further affected by misogynoir. Misogynoir names the particular ways that Black women are disrespected, devalued, silenced, or typecasted through harmful racialized and gendered norms or practices. Thus, what Audrey endures has a cumulative burden effect. We define cumulative burden effect as the long-term, aggregate, social, emotional, and intellectual toll on those who are part of social groups repeatedly on the negative end of judgment, assumptions, discrimination, and violence. Cumulative burden effect can be experienced by people of color, women, LGBTQIA+ people, people with disabilities, people who are immigrants, and others who have been historically, or are currently, subjected to systems of inequity. Common effects of cumulative burden are exhaustion, sadness, frustration, pain, numbness, anger, rage, confusion, and despair. Because, like with Audrey, the inequity she endures during one day does not simply reset when she wakes up the next morning. It builds and builds and builds over the course of the day, week, month, year, over her lifetime. With all of this burden, Audrey still gets up, goes to work, and is a good friend. She does all of these things while she carries a weight that is invisible to most people around her. And what's happening to Audrey, the cumulative burden she is forced to manage, happens to billions of other people too. Like Audrey, many individuals impacted by cumulative burden effect not only carry all of the weight of inequitable experiences, they are often expected to do so in silence. They can feel an expectation that they must be pleasant, patient, and polite to coworkers, friends, and others, even when those people might be contributing to their burden. Acting nice and appearing happy are often additional burdens, in particular because those impacted by cumulative burden effect know that if they share what's actually happening, their experiences may be minimized, they may not be believed, or they may be blamed for making others uncomfortable. Inequity is toxic, and cumulative burden effect can help us understand how deep and heavy that toxicity can be. So when we hear the shouts and cries of people saying their lives matter, we need to remember that not only refers to keeping people alive, but to the work we have to do to eliminate inequity in all forms. Of course, learning about cumulative burden effect alone will not create equity, inclusion, and respect in our society. We must take action by practicing behaviors that dismantle the burdens people face.